thing, and this jobs report confirms that. You have the number of manufacturing hours worked in the economy is actually going up. You see the private sector is really driving this economic growth and is driving the job creation. And this is really important, I know, to you, Matt, but really to me, and it's that we are seeing the job growth go to native-born American citizens. And what happened under the Biden administration is, to the extent there was any job growth at all, if you looked at the data, almost all of the net job creation in the United States under the Biden administration went to the foreign-born. Now, of course, some of those people are legal immigrants to the United States, but that means that a lot of the job creation was actually going to illegal aliens who shouldn't have been in our country. The best thing that you can say about the Trump economy is that American jobs are going to American workers for a change, and that's the thing that I'm proudest about with these numbers.
Right. So now another big story is that last night President Trump announced that tomorrow he's going to be hosting a meeting with the New York City mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani. He calls him communist.
I might have a
He's
stomach
not wrong
bug
about that. But anyway, point is that the Mamdani's rise can be attributed to his, everybody's, the new buzzword, if you will, is affordability.
Sure.
Right? Like, so how do we, people out there feel like they're, the economic situation isn't that great. Look, we're 10 months to the day here since the inauguration. But they want to see more. They want to see more action. We've seen a lot of steps you guys have taken. A lot of people are putting a lot of faith in what Secretary Besson is saying, that the first half of next year the economy is going to boom because of the policies you guys have enacted. What's your message to those out there who feel like they haven't seen that gain yet?
Yeah, well, first, Matt, the government shutdown didn't help, to be clear. And I do think that actually pumped the brakes a little bit on all the great economic news that we were seeing. And look, the Democrats, our attitude was, why are the Democrats doing this? They're the party of government. Why are they shutting down the government? For 10 years, they said to shut down the government is an act of economic terrorism on the United States. And it's sort of a question that answers itself, because I think that they were so worried about what the Trump administration is doing that they were willing to blow the whole thing up, hold a gun to the head of the American economy in order to get what they want. And that's going to cause a little bit of damage, but I think it'll be ultimately very, very minor, because we were able to get the shutdown wrapped up. And I guess my message to the American people who are still feeling like things are unaffordable, who are still feeling like things are rough out there is look, we get it, and we hear you, and we know that there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of wood to chop because the Biden administration put us in such a very, very tough spot. And the way that I think about this is it's always helpful to take this from the abstractions to the actual real things that people are worried about. So take, for example, a dozen eggs. I'll never forget this. It was one of the very first, maybe the single first press conference that the president had done since he had started his second term. And some reporter, probably from ABC, yells at him and says, "What have you done about the price of eggs? The price of eggs are up 300% over the past 3 years." And it's like, it was January the 23rd. It's like, what do you mean, what have we done in 2 days? It's going to take a little bit of time to fix that problem. And so if you're an American who's just struggling to get by, you work hard, you pay your taxes, you want your kids to have good opportunities, and the price of eggs goes from $2 a dozen to $8 a dozen under the Biden administration, and then under the Trump administration, it goes from $8 a dozen to maybe $6.50 a dozen, well, to you, that is still a major problem. And even though we've made incredible progress, we understand that there's a lot more work to do. And the thing that I'd ask for the American people is a little bit of patience. This economy was not harmed in 10 months. It took a deliberate 4-year administration that was making life harder for everyday Americans, that was importing foreign workers instead of giving jobs to American workers, that was over-regulating, overtaxing, overspending. They were doing everything wrong. And as much progress as we've made, it's going to take a little bit of time for every American to feel that economic boom, which we really do believe is coming. We believe that we're on the front end of it, but we also recognize that we've got a lot of work to do to undo the damage that Joe Biden did to the American economy. And the last one I'll say, Matt, is let's be honest, it's not just Joe Biden. As much as I think Joe Biden was one of the most disastrous presidents of American history, we had a policy in this country for 40 years of shipping American jobs overseas and hiring foreign workers instead of American workers. That has caused the economic stagnation of the American middle class. There was one bright spot in 40 years, and that was the first Trump administration, and there is going to be a massive exception to that 40-year trajectory of American decline, and that's the second Trump administration. We just got to keep it going.
Right. So now we're a year removed from you and President Trump winning a massive electoral victory in November 2024. And we're just a couple of months since our friend Charlie Kirk was brutally murdered by a radical leftist. But at the same time, we are seeing some, whether it's inside Congress, outside Congress, some divisions in the MAGA movement. And I get it that there's this issue, that issue, whatever. What would be your message to how to reunify this movement for the fights ahead, whether it's the midterm elections, 2028 and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have to remember that we have a lot more in common than we do not in common, and that the disagreements that animate the Republican Party, while they matter and they're important, I think these debates should happen. They should happen in podcasts, and they should happen in the media. They should happen on the op-ed pages. It's totally reasonable for the people who make up this coalition to argue about what our foreign policy should be, what our specific tax policy should be, what our housing policy should be. I mean, I had a meeting just yesterday that was focused in the West Wing about how do we get housing more affordable for young Americans because of all the things that got completely out of control under the Biden administration. You had homes that doubled or tripled in price depending on the geography in 4 years under the Biden administration. We've got to solve that problem for our young people so they can afford to buy homes, start families, and actually build their own American dream. So I think my attitude is let these debates play out, but don't let the debates that we're having internally blind us to the fact that we are up against a radical leftist movement that murdered my friend a couple of months ago and that would throw many people in the Trump administration in prison, not for doing anything illegal, but for not following the far left's agenda. That is the real opponent here. A political movement in this country that has no animating principle, that has no agenda for the American people. Their sole obsession is to take down Donald Trump and anybody who helped Donald Trump govern. Focus on the enemy, have our debates, but focus on the enemy so that we can win victories that matter for the American people. That's my message.
Right. So now, one of the things that powered your guys' victory, I think, a year ago was a political realignment in this country, where we're seeing working class people shift to the Republican side, and the Democrats, frankly, are becoming the party of the rich. There was a new report that our partners here that put on this event, CGCN, published a couple of weeks ago called Class Dismissed 2. And in this report, they go into detail about how some of the numbers on this political realignment, 75%, more than 75% of the top 30 income congressional districts are represented by Democrats now. That's a totally new thing. The last 3 presidential elections, the Democrats' counties were represented more than 60%, in the case of the 2020 election, more than 70% of aggregate GDP in this country. President Trump won counties 30-something% in each of those elections. So your thoughts on what we're seeing now with this political realignment, some of those statistics?
So let me say a few things, Matt. So first of all, I think that part of what you see as division in the Republican Party is a consequence of this realignment. We have a new governing coalition. We have a new political coalition. We have people who didn't used to vote Republican, and frankly, they have different preferences sometimes on certain issues than maybe the Ronald Reagan or George W. Bush Republican Party did. I think the Donald Trump Party is a fundamentally new phenomenon in American politics. I think that it can govern the country successfully for the next generation, but some of those divisions you talk about are just the natural outgrowth of the fact that we've got a lot of working class voters who frankly don't care what was Republican orthodoxy 25 years ago, and so they're pushing the party in a different direction. And again, I think that debate is natural and normal, and it's something that we should frankly lean into, recognizing that the far left is really the problem that we have to confront in this country. The second thing that I'll say about it, Matt, is I think it's a great thing. You know, and I'm biased. Obviously, I grew up in a working class family. I was raised by the kind of people who were blue dog Democrats, socially conservative Democrats in the 80s and 90s, and have turned hard towards Donald Trump's Republican Party. These are the people who built America's greatest icons, who built America's greatest buildings, who drive our food into the grocery store every day. They are the human beings who actually make this country run. I'm proud of them, and I want to keep the Trump coalition together. That's one of the things that we have to do in 2026. And this is my third point, and this is tough, because one of the things that was true of the Democratic coalition in, say, the 1990s is that because the Democratic coalition in the 90s was more upscale, they showed up, the Republican coalition in the 1990s was more upscale, they showed up in midterms. So Republicans tended to do a little bit better in midterm elections in the 1990s than, say, Republicans do today. And that's because while these working class voters are great, they're also people who don't necessarily show up to vote in the midterms all the time. We've got to motivate them. We've got to get them out to vote. I think it's one of the lessons that we learned in Virginia and New Jersey is that when Donald Trump is not on the ballot, you've got to give people something to actually believe in, something to be inspired by to get out there and vote. They're not going to vote just because you have an R next to your name. You've got to speak to this new working class coalition. And the one worry that I have when I look at so many of our great congressional allies, I do think that some of our folks in Congress, they want to go back to the Republican Party of 20 years ago. That Republican Party was a Republican Party that lost and that couldn't successfully govern the country. We need to lean into this new coalition, do a better job serving them, and that's how we get them to show up in these midterm elections so that we can win not just presidential races, but midterm races too.
Right, okay, so you mentioned George W. Bush at the beginning of that answer. Now, there's a lot of news going on out there. Today is a somber day for the Bush family and for your predecessor, former Vice President Dick Cheney, who passed away. Today's his funeral. So I wanted to see if you have any thoughts on or message to the Cheney family. I know there was some misreporting out there about whether or not you were invited to that or whatever, but outside of that, there's also another big report that came out a couple of days ago about how George W. Bush and the people around him are plotting for retaking the Republican Party from President Trump and you down the road and going back to the old way of doing things. I guess they don't like to win, but the point is that that's out there. So any response to that as well?
Well, first of all, my condolences go to Dick Cheney and his family. Obviously, there are some political disagreements there, but he was a guy who served his country. We certainly wish his family all the best in this moment of grieving. On the issue of George W. Bush, I mean, look, as you know, Matt, I don't put stock in any story that doesn't come from Matthew J. Boyle at Breitbart News, so this could be totally fake news. But I definitely think, and you already see this, you saw this in 2020, you're going to see it in 2025 and 2026, there is an effort to try to wrest control of the Republican Party away from the voters and away from the coalition that really delivered the big victory in 2024. I think it's a huge mistake. Look, the American people don't want stupid wars and America's jobs going overseas and wide open borders. That is, whether intentional or not, that was the legacy of the Republican Party that came before Donald J. Trump. I'm glad the president got us away from that Republican Party. It lost, but it was also a disaster for the United States of America. Let's actually have a foreign policy where we focus on the interests of American citizens. Let's have an economic policy that's about building in the United States of America rather than shipping all of our jobs overseas and getting Wall Street enriched in the process. Let's have an economic policy that's about more self-sufficiency. I mean, I have 3 kids. I have an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. I don't want to wake up in a country where I take my kid to the doctor and they can't get antibiotics, because the antibiotics that were invented in the United States of America are manufactured in some foreign country. That is the legacy of the Republican Party that came before Donald J. Trump. We're not going back to it.
Okay, so now you mentioned the foreign policy and the deals that we're seeing around the world. One of the things that's been the hallmark here of President Trump's second term, again, we're 10 months to the day since the inauguration, has been these deals. We were going to try to do this event last month, but I know you got called over to Israel on the Gaza deal.
Sure.
So give us kind of and by the way, we have in the audience here today, I know that there are ambassadors from at least 2 places. The European Union ambassador and the Taiwanese ambassador are here. Walk us through how President Trump has approached these various big picture deals, because I mean, he's got more than, I think, 85% of world GDP now in trade deals.
Sure.
with the United States, and I lost count of how many peace deals he's done this year.
Yeah, well, greetings to the ambassadors. We're thrilled to have you, of course, and greetings to everybody else, including even the fake news, I'm sure is reporting there in the back.
There's a lot of fake news back
I'm sure
they're all lined up.
I'm sure there are. I can see their fake news eyes peering up at me, I'm sure, ready to misreport everything that I've said today. But no, we love you guys too. Kind of. So here's the thing about the president's negotiating style. And I actually, we were a little delayed because the president called me right before I got on stage just about one of these deals that we're working on. And what I love about it is that it's never enough, right? And so you bring him a deal and, he sort of asks for this, this, and this. We want this tariff rate. We want this country to drop their tariff barriers. We want this country to drop their non-tariff barriers. And you say, I'm never going to be able to get that done. And then you get it done and you bring it to him and he said, well, I want 3 other things too. Because his attitude is he wants to get the best deal possible for the American people. And for too long, we had trade negotiators that so believed in the fake idea of free trade over fair trade that they were willing to sell American workers down the river without actually negotiating on the interests of American workers. And so whether it's with China or India or any of the countries that we struck deals, the basic principle is we want Americans to have better access to their markets. We believe in our workers. We think that we have the best products in the world. We want to be able to sell them everywhere. That's number one. Number two, we don't want foreign products to undercut the wages of American workers. We're actually going to protect our markets, protect our important industries, and that's a very important part of the Trump trade plan. And you've seen it happen in a lot of different ways. And then the final thing, and this raises your point about Gaza or any of these other foreign deals, is we've been able to use the incredible economic leverage of the United States of America. I mean, we're 25%, probably a little bit more than that, of the world GDP. Why don't we ever use our economic leverage to achieve peace? Because when countries aren't fighting each other, when they're actually using their economic talents to manufacture good things rather than weapons to kill each other, then that actually creates incredible economic opportunities for Americans. And that's what the president, that's why he's so focused on peace. He's fundamentally a humanitarian, and we've got 8 peace deals at this point. We're working on number 9 and number 10. And I think that, if he gets number 10 purely for mathematical harmony, if he gets to 10, the Nobel Prize should be awarded to Donald J. Trump, even though he's certainly earned it with the first 8. But I also think that there's this sense that while he wants to save lives, he also sees a world where people are engaging in commerce with one another rather than killing one another. And he just, he's a tough guy, but he's not a violent human. He's not a person, who I think understands violence at a sort of fundamental level. It's why don't you stop killing each other and start trading with one another? Why, rather than Russia and Ukraine killing one another, why don't they actually engage in some commerce with one another, travel between the two countries, engage in some sort of cultural exchange? That is his fundamental perspective that he takes into these things. And fundamentally, if we get more peace in the world, it's good for American workers, it's good for the American people, and the president's going to keep on pursuing peace. He's done very well so far, but he's going to keep on working at it.
Yeah, so there's a lot I want to pack into this next question. So one of the things what we've seen, I think, since your guys' victory last year, the whole world over, everybody I've talked to around the world, really seems to have rallied to President Trump's vision on things like trade and immigration. I just saw, and particularly with regard to China and how we need to have a better deal with regard to there, and we just saw the president get back from there.
Yep.
I just saw comments that Pope Leo made about immigration. He said just the other day, and we did a huge story on it on Breitbart last night, that every country should get to decide, I'm paraphrasing him here, every country should get to decide who gets to come in. I mean, that's amazing to see that from the Pope himself.
Sure.
Your thoughts on more broadly how President Trump really does seem to have electrified the world and woke them up to these major issues that we're talking about here?
Yeah. Well, Matt, I'm a devout Catholic, so I followed those comments closely, including on, of course, Breitbart.com. And that's my 3rd Breitbart shout-out. I've done pretty good, right?
There's a lot
in 20
of
minutes.
Breitbart
Not bad.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, guys. But it's interesting because you may not know it, judging purely from the comments of some people on social media, but the Catholic Church's views on this are actually quite clear. And it's that, yes, you must treat immigrants humanely. On the other hand, every nation has the right to control its borders. And obviously how you strike that balance is very important, but there's a lot of room there to actually control your own borders for the sake of your own people. One of the things, Matt, that always frustrated me about the immigration debate is that we ignored how open borders were not actually good for the dignity, even of the illegal migrants themselves. You had little kids getting sex trafficked. We had 300,000 missing children under the Biden administration that the Mexican drug cartels had brought into our country. You had cartels using, in some cases, 9 and 10-year-old children as drug mules for their activity. Border security is not just good for American citizens, it is the humanitarian thing to do for the entire world. Because when you empower the cartels and when you empower the human traffickers, whether in the United States or anywhere else, you're empowering the very worst people in the world. Now, you've seen this in Europe, you've seen this in a whole host of places, but it's almost like Europe and America got this idea in their head that to control your border at all was fundamentally uncompassionate, maybe it was even racist and bad. The president and I reject that wholesale. Putting the interests of your citizens first, it's not some ancillary thing. It is the very purpose of government. I am the American vice president. I wish very good things for the people of Mexico or the people of the United Kingdom or the people of any other country, but my priority, my charge is to look after the people of the United States of America, and you cannot do that if you're flooding the country with a ton of illegal immigrants and the drugs and the crime that they bring.
Yeah, so the last question I've got, please give him applause for that one. That's incredible. Okay, so Mr. Vice President, the last question
Even the Washington Post applause.
I know, I think they did. So
I got fired.
So Mr. Vice President, the last question I got for you on that note, so is that there's a big discussion right now about healthcare in this country.
Yes.
The ACA subsidies expire at the end of the year. There's a lot of questions about what's going to happen about this. The Democrats shut the government down supposedly over this. But where does this go? What do we do to address healthcare prices and premium prices and so on and so forth? What does that look like? Is it a reconciliation plan? Walk us through what happened.
So what's so crazy about this, Matt, is right before the government shut down, we had a meeting with Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer in the Oval Office.
Is this where President Trump gave them the MAGA hats? Yeah.
This is not just that. But the president whispers to one of his personal assistants. They're all very good people. And she kind of runs off, and I think to myself immediately, oh, what the hell have I gotten myself into? And she comes back with 2 Trump 2028 hats to give to Jeffries and Schumer. And then he has the photographer come in and he points at Jeffries as he's holding the Trump 2028 hat. And he's like, he says to the photographer, make sure Hakeem gets that. I'm sure he's gonna want to use it in his campaign advertisements. And it was like a hysterical moment. But when we got to the serious stuff and they said, we really want to address the healthcare problem confronting the American people, the president said, well, absolutely. We agree. We want to address the healthcare problem confronting the American people. In fact, you people screwed it up with Obamacare, the Unaffordable Care Act, and now you're coming to us saying, let's fix it. Great, let's fix it. And then they said, I think they were kind of caught off guard, and they're like, well, but we want the fix before we're willing to open up the government. And the president was like, that's like 3 days from now. You want us to fix American health care in the next 3 days, and unless you do it, you're gonna shut down the government? How about we open up the government and then work together to fix American health care? And of course, we know the history. They rejected it. They shut down the government. But I don't want to get ahead of the president, Matt, because we had a very, very good meeting in the Oval Office yesterday. I think that we have a great health care plan coming together. I think that it's gonna get Republican and Democrat support. And I think the president, look, right now, the American people get crap health care and they pay way too much for it. You have people who are paying thousands of dollars a month in premiums for a family of 4, a family of 5, and the access to health care is really low. This system is broken. The Democrats broke it, but who cares? We're gonna work together if they're willing to fix it. And the interesting thing, Matt, is people say, and this is one of the things I love about the president, people come to the president and say, no, don't talk about health care. That's a graveyard for Republicans. Republicans always lose on health care. And the president's like, I don't care about the politics of it. This system is screwed up for the American people. We need to fix it. So let's go and do it. Politics be damned. I love that. That's leadership. And that's exactly what we should want coming from the White House.
Mr. Vice President, really want to thank you for taking the time here.
Thank you, Matt. Good to see you guys.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm American
Bye, man. Thank you.
made. I got American part.